everyone. I would like to welcome our noble members, our friends, our sponsors, guests to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Workshop, Closing the Gender Gaps in Law Enforcement and Leadership. So we're expecting a great conversation today. We have some great panelists, some panelists who have some experience in this area, great leaders. So you will hear from them a little later. But before we get started, I would like to recognize our sponsor today, Thomson Reuters, Truist Financial Corporation. And today, to give words on behalf of our sponsor, we have our the former mayor of, and excuse me, Mayor Sharon Sales Belton. She is
Correct.
the first African American female mayor in Minneapolis. Is that correct?
That's
Mayor?
correct.
Okay, I got it right. So we will hear from her at this time.
Thank you so much, Chief Bumpers. I'm actually delighted to be here today, and I wanted to bring you greetings from Steve Rubley, the president of Thomson Reuters government, my colleague, Dan DeSimone, and the entire government team at Thomson Reuters. It's our pleasure and our honor to be sponsors of Noble's Women in Law Enforcement. And we've done that now for the past 5 years. You know, Thomson Reuters is a leading provider of law enforcement investigative services, and we're honored to support law enforcement at the federal, state, and the local level. We've worked closely with many of you who are at our session today over the years to disrupt global and local drug and human trafficking, to provide core investigative tools to improve the clearance rates of serious and violent crimes, and felt privileged to work closely over these last couple of years with Dwayne Crawford and Noble President Williams to support and strengthen Noble's efforts to bring the voices of its members and the community into the conversations about police reform. Please accept our appreciation to all of you for the work that you do to ensure that these reforms are addressed and adopted in our country, and underscore and eliminate the bias in law enforcement, improve officer accountability, and also to advance officer safety and wellness. All of these things are important to all of you and all of us. Today's panel, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Closing the Gender Gap in Law Enforcement and Leadership, is both timely and urgent. In the 30 years that I've had the privilege to work alongside of law enforcement, I have seen many positive changes. Black women have moved up through the ranks to hold key positions as chiefs in Dallas, Orlando, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Richmond, California, Seattle. The list goes on, and I am proud of each and every one of these women. We even celebrated just recently the African Americans in the FBI. And just recently, and I was so glad to see this, we actually even have a Black woman who's leading firearms training at ATF. Just extraordinary and wonderful accomplishments. But discrimination and harassment still stymie opportunities for many Black women in law enforcement, and more must be done to bring these issues to the forefront. Law enforcement leaders must create a culture of inclusion that is free of bias, make a strong commitment to equity and opportunity for all women, and Black women in particular, and lead the efforts to build the relationships with the community so that we have a strong pipeline into law enforcement departments and agencies for women of color. To ensure there is a pipeline of talented Black women officers that are ready for leadership, and a culture in which they can thrive, is paramount to our success, in my opinion, in law enforcement. We need action steps. We need action steps. I want to underscore that. Dialogue is important. Action is critical. Results are required. I want to take this opportunity, Chief Bumpers, to thank you and to thank Noble for your commitment to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in law enforcement. And I am excited about today's panel. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you so much, Mayor Belton, for those words, definitely of sharing with us about some of the strides that have been made with women in this profession. It's really good to hear, and we're witnessing it, and we're excited about it. Before I introduce our panel, I would just like to share with our audience about how this panel session came about. It's always been one of the most popular sessions at our conferences. One of the things is that we started a women's empowerment group, and that is representative of all of our regions. We have a representative from all of our regions on this women's empowerment group. Our chair for the group is Stacy Ledbetter. She's a retired captain and from Kalamazoo. And this has been such a great initiative for Noble as far as mentoring and pouring back into the women, those who are coming behind the leaders now. And we have, as Mayor Bao said, we have some great women leaders right now who have made a commitment to invest and give back. And we're so excited for that. And they're part of Noble. And so we wanted you to know how this all got started, and definitely share with the women that the Noble's Women Empowerment is open to all women who are part of Noble. And we encourage you to get involved with it, because you will see that it will do nothing but help you grow. It will encourage you. Sometimes we even shed a few tears as we share, but they're tears of joy, tears that knowing that we have our sister that we can lean on. And so we want you to be a part of that if you are a member of Noble. And at this time, I am going to introduce our panel to you. We have Chief Gregory Brown. Gregory Brown is the Chief of Police for the Leesburg Police Department. He was sworn in on September 29, 2016, formerly a captain with London County Sheriff's Office. Brown was most recently commander of the Eastern London Station. He previously supervised patrol operations, criminal investigations, and undercover operations in vice, narcotic, and gangs with the Sheriff's Office. In addition, he has served as the Deputy Director overseeing all basic law enforcement training at the Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Academy. Prior to joining the London County Sheriff's Office, Chief Brown was an officer with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Police Department. We also have with us Chief Anthony Holt. Chief Holt is the Associate Vice President and Chief of Police for the Wayne State University Police Department. A graduate of Wayne State, he joined the Wayne State Police Department as a police officer in 1977, rising through the ranks to become sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and now chief of police. Chief Holt is responsible for the safety and security of Wayne State, and under his leadership, the Wayne State University PD has implemented the use of body cameras on all 70 officers, worked with Wayne State Center for Urban Studies on reducing crime through the CompStat program, and established the headquarters of the National De-Escalation Training Center. Please welcome Chief Holt and also Chief Brown. At this time, I am going to allow, starting with Chief Brown, allow you to give us 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes opening comments, and let us know a little bit more about you, and if you'd like to share anything as we prepare to go into this topic.
Thank you, Chief Bumpers, and greetings to all staff, Noble. Thank you for this opportunity. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this very important discussion: diversity, equity, inclusion, closing the gender gaps in law enforcement leadership. Got roughly about 25 years experience, and yes, this is my third badge. I'm not sure if it's my last or not, but it's definitely my third. But I can tell you my home agency, which I spent 20 years with at Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, when I first got there, was 94% male. 94% male. So right away, you can see that is a big, big problem. So I think this discussion is befitting for today. It's a shame that in 2021, we still have to have these discussions of of inclusion, equity, and diversity, but here yet we find ourselves. And I think there's a lot of value in some of the lessons learned of law enforcement leaders that have had some level of success in ensuring that they've ushered in diversity, inclusion, and equity within their respective agencies. So today I'm excited. I'm honored to be a part of this panel. And hopefully I can imprint on some individuals, some guidance as to how Leesburg Police Department has been somewhat successful in our endeavors in increasing our diversity. We're still struggling, just like everybody else, but that's not going to stop the fight. Thank you again, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Chief Brown. And now we will hear from Chief Holt, who will give us a few words about himself and then share a little bit about this topic as we prepare.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's attending this session, and specifically want to thank Noble Leadership for inviting me to be part of this panel. I started in police 43 years ago. I started in a department that was 98% males. I think I was only the second African-American male. No one's ever risen past the rank of sergeant. And this is a department where education is foremost. To be hired, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and you have to be academically eligible for a master's degree. I sort of worked my way up through the ranks, and while working that way up through the ranks, I could observe what was missing. And what was missing was diversity. It wasn't there. Even though the community was demanding it, we didn't put it forth. So I said, I'm going to wait out this change. I'm going to be the vocal aspect to make this change happen. And I so resonated with what the former mayor of Minneapolis, Ms. Belton, stated, that we have to make this change. In my opinion, there's been way too much dialogue and not enough action. The issue that we are discussing today has to be a top-driven down initiative. Change starts at the top. It has to be driven down to demonstrate this is where the buy-in is in place. We can no longer just make this a soundbite with just dialogue, and we need to do better, and we have to do better. We have to put practices and procedures in place to reduce the gap. There could be no more excuses as, oh, women and minorities are a late entry into law enforcement. Or there's nothing we could do. We have a seniority-based practice. These are barriers that still exist, and we have to remove these barriers. Just hiring more female recruits, that's not the answer. It has to be coupled with career development, continuing education, and set in an upward career path. I have an officer development program to bring qualified recruits in, and then I train them up. It might be that I'm getting them ready for an opportunity outside of my department, which I've done many times. The key to me is I want to see growth as development. My department benefits, the community benefits, and the officer benefits. When we engage this and we own this, this is a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Holt. Great opening remarks. And we'll get right into it. Currently, women make up 12% of law enforcement personnel in the U.S. and 3% in the leadership ranks are women. I would like to know from both of you, what is the percentage of women in your agency? And also, in addition to that question, what are your perspective thoughts regarding the diversity that women bring to law enforcement? So we'll start with you.
Excuse me, I don't know if anyone else, but I lost your volume there.
Okay.
Chief Brown, are you able to hear okay?
Yeah, the audio went out, Chief Bumpers.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Very, very slight.
Okay, I have it turned up.
Okay, now it's better.
There you go.
Is that better? I may have to lean a little bit. I apologize. Dealing with technology. But I'll repeat myself. Currently, women make up 12% of law enforcement in the United States and 3% in the leadership ranks. I would like to ask both of you, what is the percentage of women in your agencies? And in addition to that, the next question would be, what are your perspective thoughts regarding the diversity that women bring to law enforcement? And I'll start with you, Chief Brown.
Okay, well, currently, and I just recently, we try to run these stats every 6 months because we have a very, very young agency. So I just had my deputy chief run the stats again this morning, and we're currently at 108 total, which includes sworn and non-sworn, with 90 sworn. And we're currently at 25.74% female. As far as our patrol or uniformed officers, we're at 11%. I'm sorry, 15% female. So that means we have representation of female across the board. When I first got here, that was not the case. And I'll speak to this a little bit later, but we currently employ more females now than in the history of ever of the Leesburg Police Department. And we were founded in 1758. So we're trying our best to make sure that we bring women on, not just, and Chief Holt spoke to this, not just from a recruit perspective, but because we're young, we got to start somewhere, but also through our career development, making sure that we get them prepared for leadership roles to be impactful in law enforcement in the future. But even prior to working as a supervisor and eventually as an executive, I recognized the value of diversity and actively recruited and brought women onto my teams. I believe understanding that women could be a driving force in our profession began 20 to 25 years ago, at least in my region. And I want to tell a quick story that I think is very important. I attended a regional academy that was responsible for the training for 17 of the 25 plus law enforcement agencies in and around Northern Virginia. We began our session with 4 females, and guess how many graduated? None. All 4 were washed out, and it seemed the instructors had no issues in doing so. Their academy mates, which included myself, of course, had concerns, and we collectively agreed to voice our dismay with the academy staff during the end of session debrief and surveys. Having worked in the field of social services and education prior to law enforcement, I was used to working with majority of women and never had a problem doing so. Apparently, some other folks did. In my opinion, women tend to demonstrate a more mature demeanor than some of my male counterparts, not all. They also showed more empathy and compassion when serving others. So when I obtained a position of leadership with the opportunity to build and recruit my own teams, I made a concerted effort to recruit women. During my time with Leesburg Police Department, I've hired and employed the most female police officers in the entire history. The Leesburg Police Department executive leadership team consists of 4 members: myself, my deputy chief, which is a female, my number 3, which is a male, and my newly promoted captain, which is a female. So right now, we again have the most diverse leadership team than we've ever experienced. In my experience, my female teammates have brought balance, common sense, and varying perspectives, which greatly assisted with policy development and revision, programming and initiatives, and most often demonstrated an exemplary work ethic and unwavering loyalty to the mission. At one time, if most of us can remember that's got some time in the game, one time in law enforcement, leadership roles filled administrative positions. They were constantly pushed to these administrative roles. And I never quite understood that myself. But in my experience, women assigned to what I call high impact units, such as criminal investigations, field operations, and special events, have been successful in increasing operational and administrative efficiencies while improving productivity, increasing morale, and have assisted in the reduction, and I'm going to say it, they have assisted in the reduction in lapses in good judgment of officers by holding them accountable. But they do so in such a way that it doesn't rub the officers the wrong way. And that's been my experience. My overall experience with women in law enforcement has been very positive, very beneficial. My deputy chief here, she basically runs the place anyway. But in my absence, she runs it flawlessly. And I can tell you with all my heart that she is not only able to be the chief here, but she's able, be chief anywhere. She enjoys her seat. She doesn't want these responsibilities, but she's very capable. So I am very well aware of the benefits and of the value that women bring to this profession. Again, touching back on the recruitment aspect of my department, we've been very successful in recruiting female recruits across the board. But we're so young, we've got a long way to go with developing them for leadership positions. I try to make sure that we have a mentoring program in place, an effective mentoring program in place, so that way our female leadership here can impact those individuals and make sure that they understand and recognize that these positions that my major and my captain hold, those positions can one day be their positions as well. A lot of value, a lot of benefit, and they bring a lot of balance to how we do things here in Leesburg. So we've worked hard. We got a long way to go. But again, I'm hoping to help anybody on here understand the importance of women in law enforcement. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Brown. Chief Holt?
Well, I think Chief Brown copied some of my notes there because we have some of the similar policies and procedures in place. When I started, as I stated in my opening statement, we're 98% male-dominated white male organization, probably only 1% to 2% females. It's always say you can't turn a barge or big ship around. It takes years, but in my opinion, it doesn't take years. It takes leadership at the top to turn that around. Right now in my department, we are 52% females. I have a female shift lieutenants. I have a female lieutenant that's about to become promoted to captain in charge of patrol operations. And this is backing up my statement where it has to start at the top. I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that it's crucial that your agency looks like the community that we serve. The community demands it. In my opinion, in my experience, women in law enforcement, they bring a whole new different perspective in dealing with conflict, expecting those of a violent nature involving the use of force. It's no longer who could go to the gym, could bench press the most, who could say, oh, I could take a good punch and get back up. I think that era is over, or should be over. As I'm setting up a national de-escalation headquarters, we look at a very scientific way of de-escalating very violent and turbulent situations. And women, in my opinion, they bring a new creativity and that balance that Chief Brown talked about to this area. They're very creative. I have several female supervisors who run a mental health response unit. And where I'm trying to get at is I don't really want female officers or get them in management role that is really sort of culturally, we'll put you in sex crimes, we'll put you in child care cases, domestic violence information. I want them to run my special response team. I want them to run what I call my ready response team, my plainclothes team. I don't think you should be delegated to a gender type role. I'm wiping that completely out. I don't have a ceiling any type of assignment to a specialized unit or executive leadership role. My department is a little different, whereas we're a university police department, but all our officers are commissioned as Detroit police officers. We patrol a 10-point-mile radius right outside the city. In fact, 81% of patrol is not even campus related. 90% of the arrests we make are not campus related. We're dealing with several communities that have 200,000 plus people go through it on a weekly basis. So when I hire an officer, again, you have to have a bachelor's degree. I'll give you an example. I just hired 5 years ago, a female officer got her master's degree. I recruited her into the department. And when she finished the academy, I met her when she came off stage. I says, you know, you are too talented to be in this department for long. I'm going to give you 5 years. If you're here after 5 years or you haven't advanced, I'm going to find every reason I can to get you out of here. She did a tremendous job with us. Was on a plainclothes team, special operation team. Had more continuous education, more training. She got hired by the ATF and she's a supervisor agency with them now. This is the type of growth that I want. And this is what I'm looking for. Again, I think as Chief Brown says, female officers bring a lot of balance to the department. They bring a lot of compassion, they bring a lot of creativity, but don't take that as a weakness. I refer a lot of my officers to, since we work so closely with Detroit Police Department, I'm working in precinct that has a tremendous commander who's part of our Noble chapter. And I sent a lot of my officers to talk to Commander Russell. She is tough as nails, takes no prisoners, but at the same time, run tremendously community-based programs. And this is the type of leader that I try to get my officer to mentor and be a part of. The glass ceiling has to be stopped. It starts at the top. I can't emphasize that enough. Too much dialogue, not enough action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Holt. And I believe that Chief Brown and Chief Holt have made the case why women are beneficial and valuable to this law enforcement profession. My next question, can you share an experience in which women have been an asset to your department as frontline supervisory or executive personnel? And we'll start with you, Chief Holt.
You know, I have so many experience because I have female officers and supervisors on the front line here. What I'm gonna bring up is a recent experience. Like many cities after the George Floyd incident, there were protests, huge protests in probably every city almost in the country. In Detroit, we had major protests, and some of the protests took on a violent nature. They marched down the major thoroughfares. They'll block traffic. And you know, when you have these type of protests, you get to counter protests, especially in the era that we were coming through politically. So I have a female supervisor, a lieutenant, running the shift. Detroit police asked for assistance in a certain area. She took control of the area. We had two conflicting groups, the protesters, the counter protesters, and with the national sentiment, police were the enemy. She was able to de-escalate 3 sides there, really 4 sides, because the police officers themselves are certain sides that you have to de-escalate also. She had 4 different sides. She was able to de-escalate that, let the protests continue, have all sides have their say, not one stone thrown, not one fight, no one injured. That was a major accomplishment. And another incident, we had a shooting. The suspect escaped into a crowded housing complex. This happened late at night. The sergeant who was in charge of the shift set up a command center. All the training, when I say train them up, all the training that she had, she took charge of that situation, set up escape points. It turned into a barricade and gunman. Before she could even call out more additional troops of cavalry, she was able to talk this suspect out, recover a gun, make sure the person who was injured was taken to the hospital, did the after action reports, complimented her shift. She did all of this, you know, which I could take credit for. So just a great job. These are, I could really tell you how many more experience I could go in like this. And what this experience tells you of these incidents, there's no difference. There's no handicap to having a female out there. You know, they make me look good. Thank you.
Yes, very good. Thank you, Chief Brown.
So I've got 3 quick stories, and you know, I'll start with the most recent. I was reviewing a body-worn camera footage of my day team, our day shift team, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, who my officer in charge, because the sergeant was not there, so my officer in charge was out running the shift, and we all know the importance of de-escalation today. Look, we can talk about de-escalation till the cows come home, but the bottom line is that is a major tool in our toolbox that we have to utilize. We had a young man who was running around one of our challenged neighborhoods, experiencing what seemed to be a mental crisis. And she responds, and of course, he's on the body-worn camera footage and he's fully clothed, and then he runs off somewhere and she starts getting the units into the area. And they end up finding him roughly about 2/10 of a mile from the actual origin of the call. And by this time, he's down to his boxers, and he is definitely going through something, probably a few steps away from excited delirium. The way she handled that call and speaking to the gentleman staying hands off until they absolutely needed to secure him, speaking to him the whole time, and not just her, but there are two other females on his team as well. Just the way they interacted with this gentleman, and he wasn't actively resisting, but you could see that he was calming down second by second every time there was an interaction or exchange, a verbal exchange between Officer Maupin and this gentleman. And finally, rescue gets there, and he's secured and he's taken off, and it's determined that he wasn't only suffering from mental crises, but also had ingested some drugs, some hallucinogenic drugs, which caused him to lapse into an episode. But as I watched this body-worn camera footage, which is roughly 58 minutes long, I saw our training in effect. But I saw something beyond our training. I saw what I spoke to earlier, that empathy and that compassion that oftentimes, particularly when I first got in the game, we didn't necessarily demonstrate. The level of patience that I saw was exemplary. And I walked right down the hallway, right to my captain's office and said, unit citation for everybody. So the bottom line is they do bring that balance, they bring that understanding. And not only did she positively serve that individual, but she acted as an example of those younger officers. Right now, 38% of my agency is 40 and younger. So very impressionable. The average time on patrol is 4 years. So very impressionable. For them to see that versus what I saw first coming in the game is definitely impressive. I want to go back to July 4th. Throughout the year, the town of Leesburg hosts several large events. With lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, the town was able to resume its 4th of July festivities, which includes an Independence Day parade during the day and a highly attended fireworks show in the evening. This annual event attracts several thousands to our historical downtown area for both events. Holding events in this area presents geographical challenges due to numerous narrow and one-way streets, which are densely populated and have a number of small businesses throughout the whole area. Although the area is considered a walkable community and has had several parking garages added in recent years, it's difficult to manage the ingress and egress of visitors during these highly attended events. The operational event plan had not been updated in years and had been run by the same commander for over a decade. That commander retired this past April and was replaced with a newly promoted female captain, which I spoke of earlier, who had assisted with the event but never taken part in the planning. This was her first year as operational commander, and this was our most highly attended 4th of July in recent history because COVID lifted, people wanted to get out. This newly promoted captain reviewed the operational plan and made various improvements, worked with the town departments and implemented the plans for both 4th of July events, which enhanced security protocols, utilized a more effective and efficient parking plan, and she reduced the evacuation and demobilization time from 90 minutes to 45 minutes. She cut it in half. We had never seen that before. As a result of the improvements in operational planning, the town and the police department received praise from numerous residents and business owners in the downtown area and received no reports of any significant incidents. Now, I can tell you, being here 5 years, the complaints that we usually get are not ones that are praising us. They want the folks out of that downtown area. What was particularly interesting was that the entire executive leadership team, and we review this plan every single year. We had already had an effective operational plan in place, or at least we thought. It had been in place for over a decade, but it was apparent that the plan was actually operationally deficient. She did a fabulous job, and she did it in 2 weeks. So, well, I take that back. She did it in 2 weeks after being promoted. So she was promoted, and then she took on one of our biggest operations. So that in and of itself, to me, was very impressive. I'm glad I have her on my team, quite honestly. And again, to echo Chief Holt, she makes me look good. So as long as she's making me look good, I'm good with her. But she is definitely something to behold, and she's brought a new perspective to how we actually run our larger events. One more thing I say, my major. So I can't go through this thing without recognizing my major. So when I first got here, prior to me getting here, she was interim chief. And when it was announced that I was coming on board, she was bumped back to captain because there was 2 captain's positions. And I worked with the town manager here to free up a position that had been frozen since 2002, which is the deputy chief's position. So prior to me getting here, I authorized her to be elevated as my number 2 and my deputy chief. I did that for a number of different reasons. Number one, prior to me getting here, there was a large exodus. We had a 28.4% attrition rate prior to me getting here. I have to disclose that it was before I got here. So she was key in shutting that down and getting us down to a 1.94% attrition rate about 2 years ago. And it started with her actually taking the helm, taking the reins, and just calming folks down and saying, hey, look, a new administration's coming in and we're gonna get this thing together. So when I tell you administratively, she has all types of little magical tools in her toolbox. I can't speak enough for her. And again, she makes sure that the agency is being run in my absence and has done a phenomenal job with helping me balance things as we move forward into my 5th year. So thank you.
That's awesome, Chief Brown. Both of you have shared some proud chief moments where our female personnel were involved, and I call that hashtag impact, where they are making impact internally and externally, because as you said, you never know who's watching you. Those young officers that they may never say anything, but they are watching the example that is being set. Male and female are watching. So kudos to you all for your leadership and recognizing those great moments when you see our leaders, female leaders, make impact and you bring it to their attention. Sometimes they don't know, so it's good that you let them know the impact they're making. Our next question is, women want to be treated as equal to their male counterparts. However, there are times when women need other considerations and support, such as FMLA, maternity leave, childcare, uniforms made specifically for women. How do you embrace and balance those special needs in your department? And I'll start with you, Chief Brown.
Okay, thank you, Chief Bumpers. I just want to go back to what you were just saying about making sure you celebrate folks. You got to recognize them. You got to celebrate each and every time they do something great, because that's going to do nothing but instill a high level of confidence and increase their efficiency. So you got to celebrate folks. It goes a long way. Honestly speaking, I'm surprised that in reference to the question, that this is still a question that must be asked. I recognize that some municipalities, organizations, and agencies operate differently, but many of the department policies governing FMLA are derived directly from federal law. Here, Leesburg Police Department, we stringently adhere to FMLA, maternity leave, and now also grant employees an additional 6 weeks of parental leave in addition to the 12 weeks afforded to each employee. And that was something myself and the Human Resources Director, who's also relatively new to the organization, kind of ushered in about, I think, 18 months or 2 years ago. And during my time in supervision and leadership, I've had a number of employees that have suffered from long-term health issues, to include employees experiencing difficult pregnancies and breast cancer. I've always made accommodations beyond the limitations of the law and policy with the implementation of flexible hours to allow for doctor's visits and light duty assignments. And sometimes that was to the dismay of my superiors, but I felt that when you have a valued employee, you've got to pour back into them. My experience providing support in the workplace reduces the level of stress that someone may be experiencing during one of these life-changing events. In some cases, the employee makes a full recovery, remains productive, and develops a sense of loyalty and commitment to the mission of the organization. I've experienced the loss of several of my direct reports to medical retirement, and sometimes worse. Yes, sometimes worse. Those instances were particularly difficult, but I hope and pray that I provided each one of them some sense of relief with some of the things that we were trying to do for them while they suffered through their ordeal. In the profession of law enforcement, we know childcare always presents a problem, especially for single parents. Last month, I convened a work group to revisit our officer resiliency and wellness program, which may eventually include what we call spousal or significant other and familiar support for fellow officers and PD staff members. And we're trying to consider the feasibility of some form of limited cost-free childcare program. I charged my staff with doing research, reaching out to other jurisdictions to see what they're currently doing, because we all know that sixth pillar, officer resiliency and wellness, we have to have that. And since I have an increase in female staff, I better have the policies in place to make sure that they're taken care of. And I'm trying to touch all of the questions that were included in that one question. Female officers in regards to uniforms. Here again, we have a pretty robust budget. So uniforms, including their ballistic vests, are specifically tailored to each of our officers here. So we really don't have a problem there. And as far as embracing it, I say it's pretty easy for me and my staff to accept and embrace these accommodations. Now, I am very much aware that we have some old school folks in the back that feel that many of these policies are overboard, have gone overboard, and they don't like these concessions. I make it very clear through my stance and my actions that I stand in full support of these policies. I've had conversations with a few of my old school guys and told them, you never know when you might find yourself in a situation of need. And when you do, you're going to find yourself grateful. Hopefully you don't. But if you find yourself in that situation, you're going to be grateful that these policies are in place, because they're not just for our female employees, they're for everybody. They just happen to benefit our female employees as they go through certain things. But I've had that conversation with a number of my folks in the back, and hopefully I'm planting seeds that we'll be able to harvest in the future. So, we got to have policies in place to make sure that we give them administrative support, that we protect their positions while they're experiencing certain life-changing situations, and that we keep them busy and keep them occupied, and that they understand that the organization has their back, and we will welcome them back with open arms.
That is great. I have a couple of follow-up questions to a couple of things you said. On the 6 weeks maternity leave, is that paid, 6 weeks paid leave? Or do they use time?
So the 12 weeks FMLA that's their leave. They've got to use their leave for that. The 6 weeks parental leave, and that means our males and females can use that. It's paid by the town. It is substantial. And I've got some folks here that are not happy because of, well, wait a minute, my kids are older and out of school. I could have used that, but policies develop with the times, and I try to explain that to them. But yes, it's a very impressive program. I don't know how long the budget can sustain that, but right now we have it in place, and it seems to be used well by our employees that have newborns at home. Usually they don't use the full 6 weeks. After the 12 weeks of FMLA, because it has to be worked, it has to be used after FMLA.
Okay.
Usually by that time, they're ready to come back to work. So they usually don't use the full 6 weeks, but it definitely is a beneficial program.
That is definitely beneficial. Also, you mentioned the child care that you have your team working on, looking at a child care option. I just want to say, if they come up with a plan, or please be willing to share that. I'm sure other agencies would be interested in that. So I just wanted to put that little plug in. Hope you will share it with us. No sense in reinventing the wheel. We can share policies and maybe tailor them to our specific agencies, but definitely that is one that I think would be beneficial to many.
Definitely, Chief. They've got a 90-day report. So that meeting happened about 2 weeks ago. So they've got a little time, but it's a great team. I think they'll come back with some great ideas. I'll make sure that if they are feasible, because they got to be feasible, I will be sure to share them.
Okay, thank you so much. Chief Holt, if we could hear from you now, do you need me to repeat the question, or?
Oh, no, I heard the question loud and clear. So
Okay.
I want to just say right away that, of course, we adhere to all federal guidelines, contract language, but at the same time, I bring my management team together and I emphasize that we value our employees. We just don't pull you out of the box and say, here's your uniform, go to work. We value you. We want to do a career path development. So I don't consider if a female officer has special needs. I don't consider those concessions. Male officers have special needs. In the past, the good old boys club took care of those special needs. So, and the good thing about being at the top, I want to make sure that these needs are addressed. In terms of uniform, I don't even wait till they say I might need some uniform adjustment. If I notice it, I'm going to call them in. I don't want them to say, I can't mention that because it might appear to be a weakness. If we value our employee, we want to make sure that physical and well-being are enough that they could go out there and work with the community. That's crucial to us. Even more child care needs, we follow all the guidelines, but I really will push the envelope because I'm sitting at the top. I have thousands of hours of comp time in my 43 years. I've probably never taken a day. I'll transfer comp time. I will give you light duty before you have to actually take your maternity leave. I want to see, what do you need to be able to do the job? And I am concerned about your well-being and safety. And it's true what Chief Brown said. You have a segment of the department that's been here a long time, but I'm not really talking about concessions and negotiating to bring you into this century. We're here and we're moving forward with it. I can help you with your exit if the program is just not to your liking. Everybody here is very valuable. So I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that we take care of that well-being. Shift assignments are tough for everybody, male and female. Childcare is a real tough issue. The good thing about being a part of a university setting is there's so many resources available. So I have a committee composed not only of officers, but different people within this university setting, see if we could come up with a childcare option. Police work doesn't have to be so paramilitary that you can't make adjustment in command settings. Contract-wise, state what the shifts are, so I'll make an adjustment in the shift to allow for childcare work. We have different contract stipulations to say what happens if you're tardy, if you're late, you can't come in. But those are all issues that could be discussed. It's not because I did it for one, I have to do for the other. But I think overall, if the department sees that you're looking at the well-being, not just of the female officers, but the department as a whole, your safety and health is of paramount importance, I think we can move ahead. Do I make advantage of special needs? Do I take advantage of it? Absolutely do. I have a certain room in the station, a privacy room, that the female officers go into and take care of special needs if that requires that. Now, again, I think these things start at the top, and you have to show a willingness to bend. Doesn't mean that your department or your officers are not still going to be as effective, probably be more effective. When they see that you care, I think you get a little bit more. So I'll go that extra mile.
Thank you, Chief Holt. I think based on your comments, it's obvious that they know, based on the things that you've done, that you do care. And that's really what people want to know. They want to know that you care about them. So thank both of you so much for sharing. Our next question is, what advice would you offer women on how to overcome obstacles or discriminatory barriers in getting hired, obtaining premier assignments, or getting promoted to leadership positions? And we'll start with you, Chief Holt.
Well, this is a good question, and I can relate to it because it's the same barriers that African-American officers face, especially when I came on the job 43 years ago. I know when I first applied for the job here, they said, oh, I had a bachelor's, so you had to have a master's degree. And I just walked away and says, okay, I guess I need to go get that and come back. But today, it's not that way. You have to challenge that. If women have obstacles, when I go talk to recruiting classes, I go to historical black colleges, I go to law schools, I go to high schools, and I say, will you find out what you want to do? Do you want to go into police work? What area of police work you want to go into? You need to research that. Let's find out what the qualifications are. And then if you know what the qualifications are, what do you have to do to get there where you can apply for the job? Number one, do not settle for dismissal of your inquiry. go to the next step. If someone tells you we're not hiring now, well, where will you be hiring? When someone says you have to have this, has to pass this physical MCO test, so many push-ups, so many setups, then what do you have to do to prepare yourself to do that? When they come to me and I recruit someone and she says, oh, I got to lose this much weight, I don't think I could do that. I said, look, here's a list of places you could go to get assistance with training you for this type of test. So don't just take that as I can't do it. If you want to do it, don't settle for this dismissal. And once you're in the department, find out, like I said, I set a career path, find out what do you need to do to move ahead? What do you have to get into this next session? I don't have anything that's male dominated. What do you have to do to move up the ranks? What is promotional like? At Metro Detroit Noble Chapter, we train on assessments, how to go through assessment center, how to take these tests. Again, I keep bringing up Commander Russell in Detroit Police, because she's a great mentor. She followed this coming up. So I say, well, go talk to someone in that area, get an idea of what they went through and what you have to have. If you are denied, and sometimes you don't get what you want right away, determine why, examine why, investigate the reasons why. Now, it might be the situation you have to go outside of that jurisdiction. You might have to go to EOC. You might have to file a complaint. You might have to use your grievance procedure. But take advantage of every opportunity. Just do not settle. That's why I like officers when I come in and I want to say, what is your 1-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan? Where do you want to be at the end of your career? And they sit there and they discuss that. And then I'll call them back up 2 years later and says, where are we at towards your goal? And if you're not there, what's preventing you from getting there? If they say, well, I'm okay, I just want to, patrol for 20 years. I said, well, no, this is not the right place for you. You're much better than that. Your potential, your skill level is so much greater. You could do so much more than that. But I just don't want anyone to settle. If there's obstacles, I had complaints from EOC or something, I didn't give somebody something or I passed them by. I welcome that because it gives us a case to examine something I might not be aware of. Maybe subconsciously it was something I did that it shouldn't have been done. But you have to give that pushback. And that's just really my take on it in terms of overcoming obstacles.
And I wanted to just for you to mention a little bit more about the Detroit chapter's assessment training that is done. Is that for municipal and federal members? Just a little overview of what that looks like.
Well, we open it up 2 ways. We basically open it up for those working within the police department that go from officer to sergeant, sergeant to lieutenant, and then assessment center for those who want to go into commander ranks. And, we sort of talk to you how to take the test, how to study for the test, how to present yourself from interviews. We have people went through the process. It's been very, very effective. And it's great when we see our own members come in and says, that assessment center really helped me move up the chain here.
That's really good to hear. That is really what our chapter should be doing, making that investment in those who aspire to move up the ranks. So I'm glad to hear that. Chief Brown, would you like to share?
Absolutely. And I know that Chief Holt made the assumption earlier that I had been peeking over his shoulders looking at his notes. I think he returned the favor there on me on that one, because he touched on a lot of the same things that I recognize as well. That in law enforcement, predominantly a male profession, and I saw where somebody wrote, I think it was Dr. Charles wrote, men can change the position and quality of women's contribution in policing any day. They can open the doors and lift the ceiling for women. She is 100% right. It starts at the top. It starts with those who are the predominant in the leadership to make sure that everybody has a fair shake at climbing through the ranks and climbing through the ranks for the right reasons. If I was to give advice, and this has occurred before, and again, this advice is not just to females per se, but again, this is what Chief Holt, kind of referenced earlier. some of the same challenges that Black males have had first coming into the profession as well. I am in no way comparing the journey of Black females to Black males, because I've heard the stories and I've observed the stories. So kudos and hats off to African-American females that are in law enforcement. But the first piece of advice I would give is do not give up and do not give in. And Chief Holt kind of alluded to that. Again, I'll repeat, do not give up and do not give in. And what I mean by that is not succumb to any traps or snares that might derail your efforts. Don't be baited and rise above the fray, because we all know that, you know, those subcultures in our agencies, sometimes that fray can be overwhelming. Do not become involved in office politics, but be familiar with how to navigate that environment. Do not shy away from, but be sure to volunteer for difficult and challenging assignments outside of the regular positions that the agency presents you with. Some of the strongest individuals in leadership took those undesirable administrative positions, whether it be accreditation, whether it be ECC, whether it be special events, whether it be budget, fleet, and they added that to their operational experience. And guess what? Those individuals, I think Chief Oliver said it best to me several years ago, they're chief maker positions. When you can combine those operational talents and knowledge along with your administrative knowledge and talents, you have the upper hand when it comes to the assessment centers at that point. Try to become familiar with all aspects of your department or agency. And as far as getting hired for premier assignments, expand your experience and build your credentials to such a degree that it's hard for anyone to pass over you for an opportunity, assignment, or promotion. In other words, place a gap between you and your closest competition that is so wide that it's virtually impossible for anybody to deny you. Make it difficult in a good way for them not to select you. What happens when you do that? What happens when you build that experience, you get that training, take those positions, you are successful in those positions, you're professional, you're steadfast, and you're committed, is you create this big gap. And here you are over here, and here's your closest competition. So when those decision makers up in the 7th floor, Mahogany Row, whatever they call it in your agency, are making those decisions on who's next in the queue, no matter how badly they want to go with this person, they know they can't. They got to go with this person, which happens to be you. So prepare yourself beyond just those regular assignments. I often tell people, and I told folks when I first got here, that, you know, if I've got an 18-year vet who's done nothing but push their cruiser around for 18 years, and then I've got a 3 or 4 year individual who has shown up to work, takes the extra duty assignments, is out there doing what they do, building community relationships, making fair, equitable arrests, you know, volunteering for extra assignments, always has a smile on their face, professional, and they're competing for the same position. Guess who I'm gonna pick? Guess who, and I tell you, the vets got mad when I said that, but they also stepped their game up when they realized I wasn't playing. So my advice would be just do all you can do to prepare yourself for those opportunities. Don't remove yourself from that lens of opportunity. Go well, far beyond what's really required. And I know that doesn't seem fair, but until you're into a position to change it, you've got to go that extra mile. I call it the 120 principle. You've got to be 120%, unfortunately, for those who are only operating at 70, 75. That's how you get through this whole situation. Yes, it's people like myself and Chief Holt's responsibility to break those glass ceilings, and we're trying our best. But we also want to make sure individuals are poised for those opportunities and prepared for them to basically take on this, take on the lineage. So that's really my take on how you prepare, and my advice to individuals that want to prepare themselves for this role. And you know, it's not an easy road, but you will be better prepared for it.
Outstanding comments, outstanding tips, and I hope everyone is taking notes and listening. It's definitely important to never give up or give in. I tell the men and the women here, your only competition should be yourself, and don't compare yourself. Comparison breeds discontentment. And then when you become discontent, you stop focusing on goals. So it is very important that you continue to grow. You will never, ever move up, even those who have no desire. Everybody doesn't want to be a supervisor, but you still should be committed to growing. Whether you decide to be a career officer, you should want to always be improving yourself. And now the ceiling is glass. I tell people, when I came along, the ceiling was ceramic. You couldn't even look up there. So I'm just thankful now that we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. But it takes leaders like yourselves to continue to push that message, to continue to say it won't be status quo, that we'll make the playing field level. So thank you so much for those comments. Our next question: what policies do you have in place to ensure that women are hired and promoted in your agency? And we'll start with you, Chief Brown.
Thank you. You know, we all know about policy. I won't even go there right now. I think I'm going to make comments on that a little bit later. But over the years, we've made several revisions to our departmental policies and procedures to ensure inclusivity and diversity. We've totally revamped our hiring and recruitment process by increasing and diversifying the staff assigned to this unit. And we created what I call an SRT, which stands for Supplemental Recruiting Team. The SRT is comprised of members sworn and unsworn from varying demographic backgrounds from throughout the whole department. And to ensure a fully diverse team, the members were selected and appointed by yours truly, me. I wanted to make sure that that it wasn't a process, because it's, you know, I can do that. You know, if it entails money, I have to hold a vetted process. But when it comes to certain positions, I'm appointed because I want to make sure that we're meeting the mission. When I first became chief, I reviewed all the eligible applicant files and attended all the testing processes so that I could personally observe who was testing and competing for the position of police officer. This made for very long days, but it was apparent we not only had diversity issues, but we were hiring the wrong people. This set the tone real early when the chief of police shows up at the process at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning. They got the message relatively quickly. Prior to this, that unit originally had way too much latitude and was eliminating individuals with things such as beards and deep accents. From that point forward, the recruitment unit had to report weekly as to the status of all viable applicants and had to justify elimination at any time in the application process for progress beyond a certain point in the actual process. I also required additional fields to be added to the applicant report to be able to identify, track, and report the various demographics of applicants at any given time. We had not been doing that, so I didn't know who was coming through unless I actually showed up to actually observe the process. Within 18 months, the culture and practice of that unit had changed to reflect more of what I envisioned recruitment to be. In regards to our promotional process, I outsourced that to an independent contractor who works closely with me, select members of my executive team, and the recruitment unit to develop fair and unbiased assessment centers for our promotional process. I personally developed our command level process with the assistance of my human resources team and some of my mentors. Command level assessment processes always have an external diverse panel member, meaning they don't belong to the department. They are active in law enforcement, so they're currently active. I also have somebody sometimes from the private sector and representatives from the community or the media, because it's different than performing in front of somebody who wears a badge than somebody who's outside who's going to be highly scrutinized. And on my command level, I need to make sure folks can handle that pressure. I have found this approach to be effective in ensuring all candidates are processed fairly and objectively, and as much as we can, absent bias. But ultimately, it comes down to this, and I spoke to it earlier. It comes down to this, folks. Many departments have policies in place that are supposed to reduce bias and increase fairness, but they are just that. They are policies. Those policies have to be put into practice, and leadership has to get involved. We've heard that over and over again. Leadership has to get involved. We have to be aware of what's going on within our departments. If an organization is lacking in diversity and not making progress, you have to revisit how you're doing things. You got to go back, you got to look at those policies, you got to look at who you have in place that are making those decisions before they come to your desk. Sometimes it's just a small tweak or change, and other times the hard work begins and it's a total redo. But the value that comes at the end is an increase in diversity. And I think you can't surpass that, particularly in today's times.
Thank you so much, Chief Brown. Chief Holt?
Well, again, I just follow a lot of things that Chief Brown said. I think the key here is, as I said at the very beginning, and I constantly repeat this, change starts at the top. When I came here, or when I got involved in the leadership role, even beforehand, I saw how the recruitment and hiring practices were done. It was to protect the culture that existed for years in police department. It wasn't actually to get the best person or to diversify the department. It was actually to protect friends and family sort of hiring situation. First thing I did, I wanted to review the interview process. I want to know, well, why do you ask this question? Why do you ask that question? How do you scoring that question on a rate of 1 to 10? I really couldn't get a satisfactory answer to that, so I just threw that out right away. I brought a team in of professionals, HR professionals from within the university, HR professionals from outside the university, and we looked at the interview questions. And then I brought a community-based part team to sit in on the interviews also. You're gonna be working in the community. Let's have the community out here to see what type of applicants you are. I didn't bring them in just to sit quietly and to listen while we read the question and they gave an answer. I brought them in so they could also talk to the applicant, see where the empathy lies, see what kind of feeling they have for actually working in the community. All those things were very important to me. You know, people prepare for interviews. You could take all sorts of courses, how to prepare for the interview, how to present yourself, and that's never a field you would have had 1,000 in. So I want the interview to sort of break that down. I wanted to see who the person is. I had one interview with a person say, I know I have a lot of biases, but I don't think I act on those biases. But he probably does, and just don't know it. And I had another interview where a person stated, yeah, I don't know if I could really do this. I want to do it. I've never really been in a fight before. I don't know how I react. And I says, well, you know, if you treat people with respect, you give them that dignity, you treat them the way you have to be treated, that 85%, you'll never have trouble. Now that 15% where you have to bring it, we'll show you how to do that. And you know, you're working as a team. It's very important that a person knows when you interview on them for that job, once you get that uniform, you're still that same person. If you want a tough go-get-em guy, when you put that uniform on, you aren't any tougher. You're still that same guy. But we'll train you. We'll train you up as how to do this job. And recruiting, it was easy here because we didn't go in the areas. Recruiting before I came here was to protect what they had. I go into high schools and I talk to students and get them an interest in this field. We have civilian jobs that people could start with and then work up to the ranks here. I have dispatchers, communication controllers who are in school here. And once they get their degree, I bring them into the department. I go to other departments to see if officers want a different perspective for patrolling, different opportunities here. I go to universities, not just at Wayne State, and I talk to classes. I do recruitment at career centers. Noble in Metro Detroit, we host one of the largest recruiting drives. We bring agencies, local, state, or federal agencies from all over. And we have an all-day recruiting, and we're right at that table. So this is something that we do. Now, the key is that I know because I'm at the top, I'm making a change. And I do it in promotions, I do it in recruiting. But I have to make sure these changes of policy stay in place. I don't want to reverse once I leave. I don't want them to hire another chief who has a different option. So we look at the policy we have in recruiting. In promotions, I look at the evaluations. Are they too subjective based? Let's change the evaluations right based on the data. And let's do that. Let's look at that. Like Chief Brown, I took the promotional test. I went outside, had an outside company come in and run the promotional written test. We train you up for the assessment test. And then I make the choice, contract rise out of the first 5 applicants who I'm gonna move forward. I will see anybody who can move forward or get that diversity of their first 5 applicants, then I guess the test will stay dormant till it expires and we do it again. I am very serious about change at the top. We're gonna look like the community we serve. We're gonna have the people in place who could further that going forward.
It's very important for leadership to be intentional and strategic in everything we do now. It just cannot be status quo. And Chief Holt, you mentioned civilians, and someone in the chat did ask the question, how, I know we're talking about women law enforcement personnel, but our civilians are very important to our agencies. So how do we show that we value our female civilians in our agencies, whether that be your dispatchers, your clerical staff, your record staff, to make them understand they're just as important to the agency? So we'll start with you, Chief Holt, since you did mention civilians.
Yeah. We say at the beginning, I have 70 officers. I have 75 officers. I have a department total of 110. So this is one department. It's not that I have this career path for officers and then the civilian staff is not part of it. No, they're exactly part of it. We pay for your education here. If I have female or male communications controller, I'll call them up here. I want to know, why aren't you going to school? Why aren't you doing some continuing education to better yourself? And I'll show them what's available for them within this department to move up. You do a great job here, you could be right here. In fact, I had one female officer, not a female communication controller. She started as a cadet while she was in school. She became a communication controller. She had her degree, and her skill level, and her attitude, and her drive was so good, I created a position as a coordinator of dispatch operations. And she stayed here for 2 years. She left here and went to University of Chicago as head of security operations. From University of Chicago, she came right back to Detroit, and she runs the security operations for the Illich Corporation. And I use that as an example of growth. Even the female office assistants. I think everybody knows that the chief secretary basically runs the department. At least they think they run the department, but they're very important. So you have to let them know that too. You have to value what they do, not just by talk, but some kind of action where you're showing them that. I think the best action I see is opportunity. If you like where you're at, what can I do, or what kind of training can you get to enhance where you at? Some people tell me the best way to show me is to pay me. So they shut me up real quick. They want more money, and then I'll advocate for that. I'll do that right away. But I think you have to show this is one department. It's not just the officers and everyone else. We had the COVID, right at the outbreak here, officers, we're essential employees. We're here every day. So got hazard pay for the officers, but I got hazard pay for the office staff, for the communication controller, for the custodians assigned to the building. You got to treat everybody as equal here. Everybody's important in the total outlook of this operation to make it go forward. When I picked out a special schedule because officers were getting exposed, and I say, okay, I tell you what, we're going to work you for a week. You're going to be off for 2 weeks. I'm going to change the shift assignments. I'm going to change your responsibilities in patrol. Did the same thing for the office personnel. They are very important. When we were given the vaccinations, it was supposed to only be officer the first responders. Well, everybody who works in this station is a first responder. So they're part of it also. So you can't make that separation. Those people in the civilian role, the analysts, the communication controllers, the office staff, they're just as important as the officers. They make it go as well. I had a procedure one time for visibility. I want at 12 noon, from 8 to 9, 12 to 1, 4 to 5. I don't want anybody at the station. I want visibility. I want the office secretaries to walk around, go to lunch, I'll pay for it. I want everybody on the street to see, so they can see you. And I think that creates a sort of a feeling that you belong to the organization. What you see and what you do is important. And again, this goes back to valuing everyone who works here.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Chief Holt. Chief Brown?
Yes, I mean, once again, I have an agency of similar size, two less than Chief Holt. So it's very easy for me to make sure that I'm visible to my civilian employees. I have two assistants. I have, I'll go back. I at one point had what we call an executive associate, and then I had a regular associate. And the executive associate, like Chief Holt said, they either run a department or they think they do. And I could attest to that the woman who was in that position prior to me getting here, she really did. She ran this department. She was a budget guru. She was a time and attendance guru. She was the utmost in professionalism, outstanding. And by the time I was able to move forward with actually reclassifying that position, she was in the retirement process. So right as she was retiring, I felt horrible. As she was retiring, I actually took that position from an executive associate position. I put it in an analyst category, analyst pay grade, and titled it office manager. So she's essentially a supervisor now. The new person is a supervisor. And because of the duties and responsibilities dictate that classification be applied. I don't hesitate at the end of the day to walk down the hallway before I leave out of here and go and sit. Well, COVID, I don't go and sit anymore because we're not allowed. But prior to COVID, go and actually sit in and spend 15, 20 minutes with my dispatchers, which are predominantly a female. Some things as simple as bringing pizza, bringing, some water, or saying, look, I can't answer. I can take a call. I can't dispatch anybody, but does anybody need a break? Things as simple as that. And I really press my leadership team to do the same because many of them are actually dispatch certified. So I press them to do the same. I press them, look, make sure you interact with them. Anytime, I'm a consensus guy. So anytime we make any types of changes in uniform, and we're not union based, well, I take that back. Legislation just changed here in Virginia where now we can accept unions, but we don't have any active unions right now in my town. So I can make changes to uniform, to equipment at will. And anytime we do that, even if it doesn't directly affect my non-uniform, non-sworn individuals, I do what I call a committee or a consensus approach. I will make sure that we have representation, sworn and unsworn, no matter what the decision is, sitting at that table to come together with a consensus recommendation that then comes to my desk. And that makes people feel very inclusive. If patrol gets a new uniform or a remake of the uniform, I make sure that our civilian staff get a new polo shirt, redesigned polo shirt, and they're able to pick that out with the uniform committee. Same thing applies to policy changes. If there's a particular policy, which is a lesser policy that we have to present for change, I make sure that if the rewrite is needed, that it's a committee approach. So I try to make sure that they're included in the decision making, in the policy making. Ultimately, it's going to be my decision, but they understand that they have a seat at the table. I made that very clear when I came here, that everybody has a seat at the table. And the reason why I did that was twofold. Number one, it increases the efficiency and the buy-in of the organization. That's number one. Number two is when I first got into law enforcement, it felt like a family. And a few years ago, we started not feeling that anymore. We started seeing this divide between uniform and non-uniform. And what I'm trying to do is close that gap and bring everybody back together. A little bit easier with a smaller organization, but I'm starting to kind of see the fruits of our labor here. So I think just making sure that they know they have a voice, that they have a seat at the table. And like Chief Holt said, that pay me more. But I'm telling you, it's the small things. Sometimes it's the smallest of gestures that make people feel like they're part of the team. And that's what I really try to do on a regular basis.
Again, awesome comments and so true. It's just like a nice new car. Everybody's admiring the outside, but it's the engine that nobody can makes it run. So thank you all so much for those comments. Definitely inspiring to our civilian employees who are valuable to all of our agencies. And my last question is, what would you encourage? Would you encourage mentoring relationships between male executives and female subordinates? If so, what advice would you offer to support the connection? And I'll start with you, Chief Holt.
Well, yeah, I do encourage it, but I need to see the outline of how that takes place. This has been such a male-dominated culture for so long. Sometimes that's the only place you can go and get to mentoring. I think I have mentored a lot of female officers within the department, outside of the department, and I think that is a good choice. But I think you need to see what the person has, or why do you want that person mentor you? Just because they're in a position might not be a good idea of mentoring. Again, you need to know where you want to go, what position you want, and determine the path how you're going to get there. If they can offer you good mentoring advice by you watching them, I mean, if you look at a Chief Brown, you say, this is what he's done, this is where he's been, he'll be a good mentor to tell me how to find that route, how to navigate that path to get there. That's a good type of mentoring. But if you're going to be careful that the mentoring doesn't go into the social aspect of it, where it doesn't become mentoring, where it becomes a different type of social relationship. I don't think that could be of any value to you. You want to get the type of mentoring that is good, that the person who you want to mentor you has skills, has something that you admire, that you could see, that he can bring to the table to help you navigate the path that you want to go.
Thank you so much, Chief Holt. Chief Brown?
Yeah, I'm right in line with Chief Holt. I don't have an issue per se with, and I'm gonna change the wording a little bit if you don't mind, Chief Holt. I don't have an issue with strict professional mixed gender mentoring relationships. I'll say it again, strict professional mixed gender mentoring relationships, as long as that's what they actually are, strictly professional. I've had a number of mentees that were female, but most often work to guide them towards a reputable female law enforcement executive. There are things in a female's law enforcement journey, I think I might have said this earlier, that I can't relate or attest to. And in those cases, I felt it was more appropriate that they have a female mentor. I helped them a little bit, got them going, identified a female mentor, and sent them off in that direction. I make it a point to voice that in the very beginning, so they understand exactly where I stand in regards to, how far I can actually help them. And, Chief Holt's right. Once it goes to the social aspect, then that's somewhere that you don't want that to go. So that's the defining line. Thankfully, over the years, I've established and identified a number of exemplary female law enforcement executives, many of them members of Noble, that I can refer mentees to. So that has helped out a lot, made my job a whole lot easier to ensure that females who are seeking career development, seeking the rise to leadership, have the right people in their corner. So I'm not adverse it, but I always stress caution in those relationships.
All of those are true statements. It's important to keep that mentor relationship professional and understand that someone can mentor you from afar. I've had mentors I've never had a conversation with, but I've watched their career. I've followed them, listened to their voice, and they have been very impactful for me in my career because early on, I only had men mentors, but never crossed the line, always kept it professional and never put them in a position where they would think it was anything other than a mentorship relationship. So just for those ladies who are listening, if you do insist on having a male mentor, make sure that as both Chief Holt and Chief Brown has said, that you keep it professional. And then again, that male mentor can always refer you to other females. Noble is an excellent resource. We have some of the best women in leadership roles here that I can ever think of. This is a great resource being in this organization. And it's not just women chiefs. We have women who have been officers for years who can share, women who are sergeants, lieutenants, captains, majors, assistant chiefs. So just don't think it has to be a chief. You have to start somewhere. You don't automatically go to the big pool. Start in the wade for a little bit until you can get to the larger pool. So please take advantage of the advice that you've heard in that area. One topic that I'd like to touch on before we close is the LGBTQ community. As you know, many larger agencies now have an LGBTQ liaison, and I recently appointed one. My agency is small. I have 268 officers, but I did appoint a liaison 2 months ago. But that was not only for externally, but for internally, because I wanted people to feel comfortable. If we hired anyone that identified in the community, I wanted them to be comfortable and know that we had a liaison. But I'd like to ask both of you, do you have a liaison, and what is your comments about having an LGBTQ liaison in your agency? Chief Brown?
Okay, so I do not have a liaison. Before I implement processes, I make sure that there's a need. We have a very robust and strong relationship with our LGBTQ community. I will say this, and they won't mind me disclosing this because they are openly, they are open in their relationships, but my number 2 and my number 4 are just that. So they in themselves are a representation of what we do here in Leesburg Police Department. And again, they wouldn't mind me because, but they don't have a problem with that whatsoever. And I don't have a problem with it. So through that, I think that has really helped me kind of establish within my community that, and I made this very clear. One of my first sayings when I first came in to the PD, because we did have a disconnect with certain marginalized communities here. And one of my first sayings was, everybody has a seat at the table. And then it was ... in caps, everybody. Nobody bumped back. Maybe it's because I'm a big guy, I don't know. But nobody bumped back, nobody gave me a problem with that. And that still is one of my sayings. So should the need arise where we have to transition and actually establish a formal, because right now I think we're more informal, but a formal liaison, I will not hesitate to do so.
Thank you so much, Chief Brown. Chief Holt?
Well, we don't have a formal liaison that reflects to the department, but I'm on several task force, and we have a very robust committee at the university, which I'm a part of. I'm just trying to find the right way to verbalize it and articulate it, but we have a department that everybody is open. I have a department like Chief Brown. We have members of that segment of society within our department. And my number 1 goal is to make sure there's no adverse or different treatment. I call that group or that members in the department that have the same conversation that I have when I bring new officers in the department. If you feel that you are being discriminated, harassed, or treated differently in any way, skip all the chains and come right to my office, because that's not something I won't tolerate. Now, I'm interested in officers who could do the job, and those who are struggling to do the job. My job is to find out what I need to do to help them be able to do this job if they want to do this. the marginalized community, I think I am the biggest spokesperson for them. And my leadership in the department is going to reflect that.
Thank you so much, Chief Holt. We have come to the end of our panel discussion. I would like to thank both of you for being a part of this panel. I think we were supposed to have 3 panelists, but 2 was excellent. We did a great job like I knew we would. I would just like to say to both of you, it was just refreshing to hear your comments. You are doing some innovative things in your department. You're intentional about ensuring equity and fairness, regardless of gender. That's music to all of our ears. You're investing in those who are coming behind you, those who are there, making sure that you have a solid foundation in your department. And then you're continuing to make a difference, not only internally, but externally. And so that says a lot because you do want to be reflective of your community. So we just say thank you. I applaud you. Kudos to both of you, great leaders. And I think today you probably did a recruiting pitch because anyone would feel happy to work for either one of you. I know I would, just hearing what you had to say. So thank you so much on behalf of our National President, Linda Williams, our Executive Director, Dwayne Crawford. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this panel. Thank you for being a part of Noble, and keep making an impact.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. I would like to say at the closing there, the best example of this session today is you, Chief Bumpers.
Thank you so much. I don't think our executive director is back on, but to all of, we had 80 participants, a little more than 80. Some have gone, exited the room, but to those who are in attendance, thank you so much for being a part of this panel discussion today. And I hope everyone took notes. I hope you heard something that you can take away from it. We had some great tidbits, some great information. And I'm sure either one of the chiefs would be willing to discuss any of the topics further, and you have their contact information. If you don't, please contact the Noble National Office. So again, thank you everyone for being a part of the discussion today. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Great conversation. Thank you for including me.